Hello and welcome to White Wanderer. I'm Jack and you join me today at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, specifically in the yard here at Haven Street, surrounded by various rolling stock. Now there are multiple events happening this year to celebrate various occasions. Railway 200 of course, and it's also the 150th year anniversary of the Ryde and Newport Railway, which is the line that the steam trains use to this day. However, there is another cause for celebration, and it involves this old girl over here. Now this is Cowborn, and she is a bit of a celebrity in the realms of railway preservation, certainly an icon here on the Isle of Wight. She is the last remaining Adams O2 tank left in existence, and today, the 26th of April 2025, marks 100 years since she first came here to the Isle of Wight.
Cowborn then really is the last of her kind. But that is just one of the many reasons why she is such an iconic engine. The Adams O2s were arguably the most important class of locomotive to ever run on the island's railways. The class single-handedly seeing out the final days of steam on the Isle of Wight. Cowborn was originally London South Western Railway 209. Built to the design of William Adams in 1891. She came to the Isle of Wight in April 1925 as part of the second batch of O2s to make their way across the Solent. Since then the engine worked extensively across the network and was one of the last O2s left in service at the end of steam in 1966. Whilst her classmates succumbed to the cutter's torch, Cowborn thankfully found her way into the hands of the White Locomotive Society and their base at the old Newport Station. Here she stayed until 1971, when the group at short notice were evicted from the station. And at this point Cowborn became instrumental in the big move to Haven Street, the birthplace of the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. Since then she's become a regular performer on the Heritage Line and a vital part of the railway's operations and image.
Now the history of Cowborn is a rather long and extensive one. It would take at least 2 videos to cover it in any kind of detail, and I will get around to doing that later on this year. But for today, to celebrate, I thought I'd have a bit of fun, which is why I've organised to join the fireman and driver this afternoon on the service to Smallbrook.
Now by this afternoon I of course mean tomorrow afternoon, because today Cowborn is clearly sat in the yard out of steam. Luckily, however, through the magic of cinematography, we don't have to wait that long. And there's just enough time in the virtual segue to go and have a look at the other Cowborn. One I'm hopefully saving up my pocket money for. Before long then, it's time to go and wait on the platform for the big Cowborn.
Now Haven Street actually sits in a bit of a dip on the line, and if you head that way towards Wootton, you instantly hit a 1 in 70 incline. If you're heading that way towards Ashley and Smallbrook, you will also hit with a 1 in 170 incline, followed by a 1 in 70. So it's quite steep either side of Haven Street. Cowborn is currently up in Wootton. I'm going to have a bite to eat quickly whilst I wait for it to get back to Haven Street, and then I'm going to jump on the footplate with the driver and fireman and head to Smallbrook and back. Permission to come aboard then, sir. Wonderful.
After exchanging greetings with driver and fireman, it wasn't long before we were on our way.
Hitting the 1 in 70 now. Rowlands Lane Bridge. So this is where it levels out a little bit. And then you've got another climb up to Ashy in the summer. Right here, it's the summit of the line, coming right up. The pheasant on the line. Move. Coming up to Smallbrook. We drop down to 15 miles an hour. Go around the bend.
Arriving at Smallbrook, we ran around our train before coupling up to the other end, ready to head back to Haven Street. The gradient out of Smallbrook itself is an upwards 1 in 75 and on a curve, which can be rather tricky for locomotives in the wet. But on the upside, it is sure to guarantee a great amount of noise. Arriving back at Haven Street then, I said my thanks and farewell to Tony and Rupert, who had been the driver and fireman for my trip.
Happy anniversary then to Cowborn, and here's to the next 100 years in service here at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you come and visit the Isle of Wight Steam Railway this summer and come and see Cowborn in service. That being said then, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again very soon. Bye bye.